Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Monday, September 15th, 2025, and I'm on my way to work shortly. And on Mondays, we talk about mathematics and statistics. And so this week, we're talking about miracles. So what is a miracle? Well, the dictionary definition is that it's a surprising and usually welcoming event that's not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered usually to be some kind of a consequence of divine agency or intervention. There's a common expression I'm sure that we've all heard, maybe even used, along these lines, that it was a miracle that he or she, or it was a miracle that they survived. And so by that, we usually mean that the odds were so remote as to seem virtually impossible. So consider the case of Vesna Vulovic. She was a Serbian flight attendant who survived the highest fall without a parachute from the sky, from a distance of or a height of greater than 10 kilometers or over 33,000 feet. Remarkable. And so back in 1972, she was the sole survivor of JAT Flight 367 after a briefcase bomb exploded in the baggage compartment of the DC-9 plane that she was on. And the plane, of course, broke apart. It fell from the sky and landed scattered over different parts of what's now the Czech Republic. And she was trapped by a food trolley in the plane's fuselage as it broke away from the rest of the aircraft. And so the fuselage with Vulovic pinned inside landed in an angle in a heavily wooded and snow-covered mountainside. And her history of low blood pressure, by the way, also helped her because she passed out very quickly after the cabin had depressurized, and this kept her heart from bursting as well upon impact. So in the end, she spent several days in a coma. She was hospitalized for months, actually, with a fractured skull, 3 broken vertebrae, broken legs, broken ribs, fractured pelvis, and so on. And although she was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, Vulovic eventually made an almost complete recovery, and except for that she walked with a limp apparently after that. But she later credited this ordeal, incredible ordeal, of turning her into a devout Orthodox Christian and an optimist, of course, who wouldn't be? She said, "If you can survive what I survived, you can survive anything," end quote. Who could disagree? Well, in just 3 months ago, back on June 12th, 2025, there was the case, you may have heard of this, of Air India Flight 171 that crashed into a youth hostel, I guess, in a building just a half minute after takeoff from London's Gatwick Airport, killing everybody on board, or 229 people in total, but with one exception. That is, exactly one person did survive, 40-year-old British citizen Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He'd been seated next to the emergency exit in part of the aircraft that ended up breaking away again for the rest of it, and it came to rest on the ground floor of the hostel. The emergency exit broke open upon impact as well, and he was actually able to climb out, and then he was filmed walking away from the wreckage before he was then whisked away in an ambulance. Anyway, there's a whole wiki page that's devoted to the sole survivors. The one person survived, everybody else was killed, which identifies over 100 different cases, again, where a plane crashed and everybody else on the plane died except for one person. So again, we would say, geez, that's a miracle that one person somehow survived. A lone survivor from an air crash where dozens and maybe even more than 200 people, as in the case of Ramesh, died. And so it's such a statistical improbability that we view these incidents as miracles. Okay? Different kind. On May 4th, 2021, just 4 years ago, a 26 Malian woman named Halima Sisse gave birth to the world's first ever nonuplets. That is 9 babies, all of whom survived. So the odds, far greater than 1 in a billion, that is B, with a billion. Again, what's kind of interesting about this too is you may have heard that expression. I did when I was much younger. From here to Timbuktu, right? So it's this kind of refers to this place that's considered to be so incredibly remote or distant or difficult to reach, right? And interestingly, Cissé, the mother of the 9 children, was born in Timbuktu, Mali. So go figure. Here's another example. In 2002, the 51-year-old electrician by the name of Mike McDermott won the lotto twice in the same year. And he did so by using the same numbers both times. Again, the statistical odds that that should happen were calculated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in almost 5.5 trillion. Okay, but then consider the even greater odds that were overcome by a Bosnian man by the name of Radovoje Lajic, or Lajic. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly, but his house was hit by meteorites falling from the sky, not once, not 2, not 3, but by more times than LeBron has won NBA championships. In other words, his house was struck 5 times on separate occasions in 1 year back in 2008. And so the odds of getting hit by a meteorite are estimated to be somewhere around 1.5 million. And so 5 independent events require that we multiply 500,000 by itself 5 times. And that would place the odds of being, 4 times, 500,000 times 500,000 times 500,000 times 500,000 times 500,000. So the odds of being hit by a meteorite 5 times is something on the order of 3.1 times 10 to the 28th power. So it's basically impossible, and yet somehow it happened. Lajic reportedly said, I'm obviously being targeted by extraterrestrials. I don't know what I've done to annoy them, but there's no other explanation that makes sense. The chance of being hit by a meteorite are so small that getting hit 5 times has to be deliberate, end quote. But I think my fave is the case of the park ranger, Roy Sullivan, from my neck of the woods, who was struck by lightning and obviously survived an incredible 7 times. That is on 7 different occasions while working in the Shenandoah National Park. And so the odds of that happening, according to a George Washington University stats professor, something around the order of 4 in 1 times 10 to the 32nd power. Wow. So it's worth pondering then, isn't it? Like, what's the most unlikely or improbable thing that you've ever seen or experienced? Is there something so incredible, so unusual, that you found yourself asking, how is this even possible? Have you ever thought to yourself, wow, it's an absolute miracle that this happened, or that somehow I survived? And if so, what are your conclusions with respect to statistical improbabilities and miracles? Well, I just want to conclude with a couple of key points then. I think we can influence or increase the odds of such miracles, the statistically highly improbable happening, through preparation, through positive energy and prayer. That is, which for me, prayer is a form of an expression of positive energy, conveyed through our thought processes and our intentions and our efforts to access something, forces greater than ourselves. Now, I don't know if that actually happens. I can't, but it does seem that prayer works. There's actually research in that regard too. But again, think about it as well in terms of preparation and positive energy and so on. But second, here's the second point I want to conclude with. As long as we're here, or until the game's over, metaphorical or literal if it's a sports competition or what have you, there's always a chance. Sure, sometimes the odds are indeed astronomical, no question about it. But until our last breath has been drawn, right? Or the gun is sounded for the end of the, the race. No one knows. Anything can still yet happen. Like the miracle, for example, of world peace. And as ever, in the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And remember that anything's still possible, even with our aging hearts and our fading memories. As long as we're here, one never knows. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.